My teacher locked the classroom door. While my throat was closing from an allergic reaction, I was dying on the floor when my debate coach told everyone to sit down and stop rewarding her drama. My throat was closing, my vision was tunneling, and I could hear people shouting like they were underwater. A metallic taste crawled up the back of my tongue. I remember clawing at my own neck because it felt like invisible hands were squeezing it shut. "Sit down!" she snapped, voice sharp as a slap. "Panic is contagious. Nobody moves." Someone tried to stand. I heard a chair scrape. "If you touch that cabinet," she said, "you're out of this program. Colleges look at that. Sit down." And the scariest part, most of them did. They sat down, because that's what she'd trained us to do. Because she'd spent months teaching us that silence was discipline, that obedience was professionalism, that our bodies were liars and our minds were supposed to be in charge. So there I was, on the sticky linoleum of the robotics lab, hives blooming up my arms like a rashy constellation, knowing there was an epinephrine injector 20 feet away, locked in a metal cabinet behind my debate coach's shoulder, and she had the key in her pocket. Back up. This didn't start with snacks and robotics. It started with a document she called the Focus Pact. Her real name was Miss Calder. She coached debate and occasionally helped with other academic teams when the school was short on staff. On paper, she was a star, winning records, polished, intense, in that inspires kids to greatness sort of way that looks good in newsletters. In reality, she scared the hell out of us. The first day of debate, she walked into the room, didn't smile, didn't introduce herself. She just handed out stapled packets like they were court summons. On the front, in bold, Focus Pact. Competitive excellence requires discipline. Underneath, no phones in the room, no side conversations, no unsanctioned breaks, no interruptions to the flow of instruction. We were required to sign and date at the bottom. There was a line for a parent signature, too. "Elite performers," she told us, pacing with her heels clicking. "Respect silence. Silence is where serious work happens. You want to chatter, go join drama." People laughed. I didn't. I have a severe peanut and tree nut allergy. I'm the person who checks every label, carries 2 injectors, and warns everyone at sleepovers. I live in this balance between, I don't want to be annoying, and I also don't want to die. So I went up after class, Focus Pact in hand. Miss Calder? I need to talk about my allergy accommodations. My 504. She didn't even look at me. She circled a sentence on the pact. I agree not to disrupt focus with personal issues during practice times. "Everything is in there," she said. "We keep it focused. Submit any paperwork to the office." I already did, but... "You'll be fine, Lily." She smiled then, thin and dismissive. "Allergies are usually overblown. Fear response. You learn to control your mind, you'll stop feeding it." That was the first red flag. The second one came 2 weeks later with a girl named Addie. We were running practice speeches. The rule was total silence, unless it was your turn or you were giving feedback. Addie was up at the podium, hands shaking, words stumbling all over each other. She was new and clearly terrified. Her breathing went all fast and shallow, and I recognized it. Panic attack. I get them too. She froze mid-sentence. Tears filled her eyes. She just stood there, staring at the wall like she couldn't see it. I was in the front row. I leaned forward, whispered, "Hey, it's okay, just breathe." "Stop," she hissed. For a second, I thought she meant me, but she was staring at me, not Addie. Did I authorize that? I swallowed. I was just trying to... "And now she's completely out of flow," Calder said calmly. "Everyone watch. One person indulges panic. The whole room collapses." Addie looked like she wanted the carpet to swallow her. "Lily," Calder said. "Out." I thought she meant out of the room. She meant out of the team. She took my name off the tournament roster that day. When I protested, she pulled the Focus Pact from her drawer and tapped that same line. "You interfered with a peer's growth process," she said. "You rewarded her emotionality. I don't train children to coddle each other. I train competitors." I went home and cried so hard my mom threatened to pull me out of debate. I begged her not to. It was the only thing that looked good to colleges, the counselor kept saying. A flagship extracurricular. So I stayed. I learned to swallow worries, to stay quiet when people looked overwhelmed, to never, ever be the one to break silence. I didn't know that training would almost kill me later. Robotics was supposed to be the opposite of all that. Our robotics club met after school in the tech lab, a big, cluttered room that always smelled faintly like solder and burnt plastic. The lights buzzed, the floor was always coated in a fine layer of sawdust and dust bunnies, and the tables were a graveyard of half-disassembled bots. Our usual mentor, Mr. Shah, was chill, funny even. He'd let us blast music quietly while we coded. He called us engineers instead of kids. He also knew about my allergy. There was a bright red sign on the door. "Lab is a nut-free zone, don't kill Lily." His idea. It made me laugh. We kept the club epinephrine injectors in a wall-mounted locked cabinet next to the first aid kit. My personal injectors lived in my backpack. The office had another set. Layered redundancy, like a good safety plan should have. So that Thursday, I wasn't worried. It had been a long day already. I'd failed a chemistry quiz. I'd watched Calder make a JV debater cry for mispronouncing a word during a practice round. By the time last period ended, my head was throbbing. Robotics was the one thing I was actually good at, without feeling like I had to perform perfection constantly. I trudged into the lab, dropped my backpack next to my favorite stool, and immediately noticed something off. The room was quieter than usual. No music, no Mr. Shaw, hunched over a circuit board. Instead, standing at the front with her arms folded, was Miss Calder. I actually thought I'd walked into the wrong room for a second. "Come in and find a seat," she said. "Phone's on the table. Face down." I glanced at my friend Jonah. He mouthed, "What the hell?" We'd all heard Mr. Shaw was out for a family emergency. No details. Apparently, the district had decided the solution was to send in the one adult in the building who already had a history of, let's say, power tripping with students. Reluctantly, everyone filed in. We slid our phones onto the front table. Some kids kept theirs in their pockets. You could always tell by the guilty posture. On one of the back tables, there was a big plastic tub full of snacks. Granola bars, gummies, pretzels. Someone's parent donation, probably. We didn't usually have food in lab, but honestly, none of us were going to complain. I walked over, scanned labels. Habit, pretzels, fine. Fruit snacks, fine. Some trail mix, skip. I picked up a bag of Harvest Crunch Bites that claimed allergy-friendly on the front. I flipped it over. Manufactured in a facility that also processes peanuts and tree nuts. I sighed, put it back, reached for a different bag of what looked like the same thing, same logo. This one said nut-free in a banner. "Pick something and sit," Calder called. "We're already behind." I grabbed that second bag without rereading the fine print. That decision haunts me almost as much as what she did next. The first sign that something was wrong came maybe 10 minutes later. We'd broken into teams to work on debugging the autonomous code for our mid-field navigation. My job was to watch sensor data and tweak thresholds while Jonah made changes. I'd eaten maybe half the bag of snacks. They were little clusters, sweet and salty, honestly pretty good. Then my tongue started to itch. If you don't have allergies, it's hard to describe. It's not like a normal itch. It's like tiny electric ants under the skin of your tongue and the roof of your mouth. At first, I thought, maybe I scratched my mouth, maybe it's nothing. I took a sip of water from my bottle. It didn't help. The itching spread down my throat. I put the bag down slowly. My heart started to thud faster. Not just from fear, but from that weird hollow adrenaline surge my body does when something is wrong. "Hey," I whispered to Jonah. "Can you look at this?" He leaned closer. "At what?" I turned the snack bag over. That's when I noticed something. The color of the allergy banner was different from the first one I'd checked. Same brand, slightly different product. I found the ingredients list. Halfway down, may contain traces of peanuts, almonds, cashews. My blood went cold. "Shit," I whispered. I pushed back from the table. The stool legs screeched. Calder's head snapped up. "Problem, Lily?" I could feel my lips tingling. I think I ate something with nuts. I need my injector." My voice came out thinner than I wanted it to. "Deep breath," she said immediately, like she'd been waiting to say it. "Everyone, eyes up, watch this. This is exactly what we discussed in debate today about mind-body feedback cycles." This wasn't debate. "I'm not panicking," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I'm having an allergic reaction. My EpiPen is in your backpack, I presume." She gestured to the row of bags near the door. I seized on that. "Yes, I just need to—" "And we've talked about this," she cut in. "Phones and bags are distractions. We're in a focused work block. You're escalating yourself because you believe you're in danger. Sit down, drink some water. Try this instead of feeding the narrative." She wrote 2 words on the whiteboard in thick, squeaky marker. Mind over matter. I could feel heat blooming on my chest now, under my shirt. I knew if I pulled my collar down, I'd see hives. Jonah raised his hand. She has a serious allergy, Mr. Shaw told us." "Yes, and Mr. Shaw also lets you play music and treat this like a hangout," Calder snapped. "We're not doing that today. We are building resilience. If we run to medication at the first sign of discomfort, what are we teaching you?" "This isn't discomfort," I managed. "It's anaphylaxis." Someone from the back. "Should we call the nurse?" "No," she said lightly. "We are not wasting medical resources because a teenager ate a granola bar and decided the sky is falling." My heart was pounding hard enough I could hear it in my ears. My breathing was turning ragged. "I have a 504, I said. "It's in my file. They're supposed to respond to this." "Any student," she said, ignoring me, "who chooses to indulge this drama instead of working can leave the team." That word again. Indulge. I took a step toward my backpack. She moved fast. Faster than I'd seen her move outside of pacing at the front of a classroom. She reached the door, flipped the deadbolt with a loud final click, and stepped in front of the bags. The room went very, very quiet. "Everyone back to your stations," she said. "Phones stay where they are. If I see anyone try to sneak one, you're done here. Understood? A couple of kids muttered something that might have been yes. Out loud, she said. Yes, they chorused weakly. I could feel my airway tightening. I knew I didn't have long. 15 minutes, maybe, before this got really bad. Maybe less. Sometimes reactions are faster. This was the part where I should have screamed, or thrown a chair, or something. Instead, years of training under her in debate kicked in. My brain ran the calculus of consequences automatically. If I defy her, I get kicked out. If I get kicked out, I lose debate. If I lose debate, I lose scholarships. If I lose scholarships, I disappoint my parents. It sounds insane, but those thoughts skittered through my head, even as my body was screaming, danger, danger, danger. I hesitated. That hesitation almost killed me. I don't know who stood up first. I just know that suddenly, a chair scraped loudly against the floor, and then another, like a wave. Hell no, Jonas said, louder than I'd ever heard him talk in class. You can't just lock us in here? Sit down. Calder's voice had this edge that made your spine want to straighten. No? That was Mia, who usually barely spoke above a whisper. She was trembling, but she stayed standing. You're supposed to follow her medical plan. Her supposed plan, Calder corrected, which, by the way, I have not seen. And even if I had, we are not at the point of needing anything except a deep breath and a reset. At that exact moment, my throat spasmed. I coughed and couldn't quite inhale fully afterward. The room swam. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. I need the med kit, I said. I was almost crying now. Please. Don't say need so quickly, she said. Your brain hears that and overreacts. You're telling your body to shut down. I'm telling you it is shutting down. She took a step toward me, hands open like she was calming down a toddler. Lily, look at me. I did. Her eyes were bright, almost excited. This is an opportunity, she said softly. To prove to yourself you're stronger than this story you're telling. Sit, breathe. You're in control. I can't breathe. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Before I could answer, there was a choked noise from across the room. We all turned. Evan, who'd been quietly working in the corner, was scratching his arms hard enough to leave red streaks. His face was flushing. I think I'm allergic to those too, he said, voice wobbling. My mouth feels weird. He held up the same snack bag I'd eaten from. The room shifted. You could feel it. Suddenly, it wasn't just my drama. It was two people. What are the odds? Calder said flatly. For the first time, she looked unsettled. Put it down. Drink some water. You're mimicking what you're seeing. It's called learned response. It's not. Evan broke off, coughing. Some self-preservation instinct in the group finally overrode the fear of her. Okay, that's it, Mia said. She headed straight for the red medical cabinet on the wall. I'm getting the EpiPens. Calder moved to intercept her. Do not touch that. It's literally why it's there. Sit down, Mia. This is not your call. Mia's hand closed around the cabinet handle. She tugged. Locked. Of course it was locked. The key is on the ring by the door, Jonas said. No, it isn't, Calder replied, and held up a small silver ring. She waggled it like a prize. It's right here. She shoved it into her blazer pocket. You've all signed behavior contracts, she reminded us. You agreed to follow my directives during focus periods. You don't get to pick and choose when the rules apply. Unlock it, someone said. I think it was Mark. His voice shook. You're gonna get sued if she dies. You think threats impress me? She snapped. I am the adult in this room. I am telling you, she is having an anxiety episode brought on by expectation. If we feed it, it will escalate. It's already escalating, Jonas shouted. I sank to my knees. Not on purpose, my legs just gave out. My chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped a belt around it and kept pulling. Sounds were getting distant. Call 911, I gasped. Please, please. Calder spun toward the front table where our phones sat in a neat line. Nobody touches a phone, she said. If you do, you are off every competitive roster I oversee. Debate, mock trial, robotics. You'll also be written up for insubordination and disrupting an instructional environment. That will go in your file. She knew exactly which strings to pull. We were honors kids, college prep zombies, conditioned to worship our transcripts. I watched the war on their faces. Save a friend versus save your future. While they hesitated, my pulse turned into a hammer in my skull. I remember thinking, I'm going to die because we're all too scared of a woman with a dry erase marker. Chaos always starts with one person refusing to play along. In this case, that person was Jonah. I felt his hand on my shoulder, squeezing. Hey, he said, voice tight. Hey, stay with me, okay? Then he stood up so fast his stool tipped over. He didn't walk to the front table. He ran. Calder lunged, but he was closer. He grabbed his phone, dodged her hand, and sprinted toward the windows. Sit down, she screamed. Instead, he started shouting, Siri, call 911, call 911. Over and over, the room exploded into motion. Mia and Mark rushed the medical cabinet again. A couple of other kids stood between them and Calder, like a makeshift human shield. Move, she snarled. She tried to shove past them. She wasn't above using her body. She grabbed Mark's arm and yanked him aside. He stumbled, crashed into a table. A robot chassis clattered to the floor. Stop! Mia screamed. You're hurting him! Meanwhile, I was trying to pull myself toward the door where my backpack was. Every breath sounded like air through a straw. My fingers felt thick and clumsy. I managed to hook my hand around one of the chair legs and drag my body a few inches. The room tilted sickeningly. On the far wall, there was a narrow window panel with a red sticker. In emergency, break glass. Behind it, an orange hammer on a chain, the tool you're supposed to use to shatter the exterior window in case of fire. Mr. Shaw had shown it to us once, laughing, Don't get any ideas, guys. I had an idea. If we couldn't get to the key, maybe we didn't need the door. I started crawling toward that hammer. Where do you think you're going? Calder snapped, noticing me. She stepped toward me. Jonah cut her off, physically blocking her path. Back off, he said, shaking. He's not a big guy, but in that moment, he looked huge to me. You're assaulting a teacher now? She demanded. Do you understand what you're doing to your future? What are you doing to hers? He shot back. She tried to twist past him. He grabbed her wrist. They struggled for the keyring. It slipped, clinked to the floor, skittered under a table. The room was pure bedlam now. Evan collapsed into a chair, wheezing. His reaction wasn't as bad as mine yet, but he was clearly in distress. A couple of kids were crying. Someone had finally broken and called 911 on a hidden phone. Later, the call log would show 3 different students did, almost simultaneously, whispering into their sleeves like spies. I reached the emergency hammer. My vision sparkled at the edges. I fumbled it out of its holder, the chain rattling. Lily, stop! Calder's voice cracked for the first time. That's facility damage. That is a criminal act. I raised the hammer. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped it. Don't, she said, and it sounded less like a threat and more like a plea. Don't do this. You're fine. You're going to feel ridiculous about this later. You just need... I swung. The first hit bounced off with a dull thunk. I gritted my teeth, forced air into my lungs, and swung again with everything I had left. The glass spiderwebbed, then shattered inward with a sharp, beautiful crash. Cold air rushed in. An alarm started blaring somewhere down the hall, a shrill, piercing wail that made everyone flinch. Now you've done it, she said, almost dazed. Outside the broken panel, a teacher from the next lab stuck her head into the hall, eyes wide. She saw my face through the broken glass, swollen, blotchy, desperate, and screamed for help. Things moved fast after that, in that weird slow-motion way traumatic memories do. Someone opened the door from the outside with a master key. A flood of adults. The nurse, pale. The principal, red-faced. EpiPen, Jonah shouted. She needs epinephrine. The nurse fumbled with the med cabinet key. Someone had found it under the table and yanked out the injectors. There was a blur of blue and orange plastic. Hold still, sweetie, she said. I didn't feel the needle through the adrenaline and the sheer panic. I just felt a rush, like someone had unplugged a vacuum hose in my lungs. Air whooshed in. I gulped it greedily, sobbing. The last thing I remember clearly is the EMT's face hovering over mine as they loaded me onto the gurney. Stay with me, Lily, he said. You coded for a second, but we've got you. You're okay. Coded. I didn't process what that meant until much later. For a few seconds in that lab, my heart had actually stopped. People talk about waking up in the hospital, like it's a cinematic moment of clarity. For me, it was confusing and disorienting. My chest hurt, my throat felt raw. My left thigh throbbed where they'd hit me with a second dose of epinephrine in the ambulance. My mom was there, eyes puffy, hand wrapped around mine like she was anchoring both of us. You scared me half to death, she whispered when she saw me blink. I tried to speak. It came out a croak. What happened? The look she gave me was complicated. Relief, anger, something like guilt. You had a severe anaphylactic reaction, she said. The EMT said your heart stopped briefly on the way in. They got you back. So I died? She flinched. Don't say it like that. But that's what that means. Her grip tightened. You're here. That's what matters. I drifted in and out for a while. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, hanging bags of fluids. At some point, a doctor explained my labs, my histamine markers, the plan for observation. It all washed over me. It wasn't until the next day that I found out what had happened to everyone else. Evan had also had an anaphylactic reaction, though not as severe. He got his injection later than me, but he stabilized. He was in a different ward down the hall. The others were physically fine. Shaken, but okay. The damage, I thought then, was mostly emotional. I was wrong. A week later, I learned about the injury. Remember that moment when Calder yanked Mark out of the way? When he crashed into the table with the robot chassis? It turned out he'd hit his head harder than anyone realized. He'd laughed it off, said he was fine. He even left the lab under his own power. By the time he got home, he had a splitting headache. That night, he threw up, and his mom took him to the ER. Concussion. No huge deal, right? Kids get concussions in sports all the time. Except his didn't get better. Post-concussive syndrome, they called it. Months of dizziness, headaches, sensitivity to light. He couldn't look at screens for long without feeling sick. He had to drop out of robotics, then band. Then, eventually, school altogether for a semester. The boy who used to spend hours tinkering with us in the lab now struggled to read a page without his vision blurring. I saw him once at the grocery store, his mom pushing the cart slowly while he shuffled beside her in sunglasses, inside. He waved, but there was something off in the way he moved. I went home and sobbed. Because yes, I almost died. That was big, obvious headline stuff. But he lost something too. A quieter, chronic kind of loss that didn't make sirens wail, but ate away at his life. And I wish I could tell you that was the end of it. I wish I could say we all healed, processed, moved on. But a few months later, things took a heartbreaking turn. One morning, news quietly spread through the school that Mark had passed away. The official statements were careful, respectful, and didn't share details. Only that his family was grieving an unexpected loss and asked for privacy. What we did know, what everyone felt in their bones, was that he had been struggling deeply since the incident. The physical injury, the isolation, the disruption to his life. It had taken a toll no one his age should ever have to bear. Losing him was devastating. It left our whole community shaken. It was a reminder that trauma doesn't always show itself loudly. Sometimes it builds slowly and silently until it becomes too heavy for someone to carry. His parents later said they wished there had been more support in place for him, more checking in, more understanding of how serious invisible injuries can be. They hoped that by speaking up, by honoring who he was, other students might get help sooner. We added a page to our advocacy work in his honor, resources for recognizing when someone is struggling, how to get support, and how to reach out before things get worse. It was our way of making sure that what happened to him would guide schools toward better mental health protections, not fade away. His absence changed everything. It made our mission personal in a way nothing else could have. I decided I wasn't going to be quiet anymore. The first step toward doing something about it was boring, actually. Doctor's offices, so many appointments, allergy specialist, cardiologist, state-mandated follow-up after a cardiac arrest event, even a brief one. We learned that the lack of oxygen for those few seconds might have caused some minor cardiac strain. Nothing catastrophic, thankfully, but enough that my exercise tolerance was weird for a while. I'd get dizzy walking upstairs. My heart would race randomly. Could that have been avoided if I'd gotten the injection sooner? I asked one cardiologist. He gave me a careful look. Doctors get trained to be neutral, but he couldn't quite hide the answer in his eyes. Earlier intervention in anaphylaxis is always recommended, he said. Delayed treatment can increase the risk of complications. Translation? Yes. Meanwhile, the school district was doing its quiet little dance. 2 days after the incident, while I was still in the hospital, an assistant principal came by with a get well soon card signed by kids I barely knew. It was sweet, but he wasn't there for that. He cleared his throat, shifted his weight, asked my mom if they could talk in the hall for a second. She said no. You can talk in front of my daughter, she said. She's the one who nearly died. He produced a folder from his briefcase like a magician pulling out a rabbit. Inside was a summary of events, prepared by the district. It emphasized that a student had voluntarily consumed a snack despite warnings. It described how the staff member on duty initially believed it was an anxiety episode, but responded appropriately as soon as the severity became evident. It stressed that emergency protocols were ultimately followed, and that the school is reviewing procedures to prevent confusion. In other words, the damage control version. We want to assure you, he said, that we're taking this seriously, but we also don't want this to spiral into something that disrupts the learning environment for other students. My mom stared at him like he'd grown a second head. She locked the door, Mom said. She withheld medical treatment. He held up his hands. I can't comment on specific personnel actions, but I can say that we value our teachers and we handle any concerns internally. So the answer is keep quiet and trust us? He smiled in that tight administrative way. We're all on the same team here. We were not. After he left, my mom looked at me. How mad are you? She asked. Off the charts, I said. My voice shook, but it was steady enough. I want something done. Really done. Not just a slap on the wrist. She nodded slowly. Then we're not letting this go. I found out later that my classmates had been organizing even before I was discharged. There was a group chat, then a private Discord server. Someone made a shared Google Drive folder titled Receipts, because of course they did. They uploaded their written statements of what happened. Photos of the snack bags and the labels. A screenshot of the focus pact, especially the parts about staying silent and not interrupting the flow of instruction for personal issues. Someone even found an old email from Mr. Shah to the administration flagging that he was the only person trained on the robotics lab emergency plan and asking that other staff be brought up to speed. They filed the first police reports a week after the incident. I remember standing in the lobby of the station, the air smelling like coffee and dust, while a board officer took down my statement. "Just tell me in your own words what happened," he said. My hands shook so badly, the styrofoam cup of water sloshed. "She locked us in," I said. "She wouldn't let anyone call 911. He wrote it down, then asked, "Did she physically stop you from going to your backpack?" I hesitated. "She blocked the door." "Did she put her hands on you?" "No, but she grabbed Mark." He nodded, jotting. "Okay." It was only later, when we met with an actual attorney, that I realized how those specific details would matter. The difference between negligence and something closer to criminal. The school's suppression campaign ramped up slowly. At first, it was subtle. Teachers quietly suggested we avoid gossiping about the incident. The principal recorded a video message for morning announcements about the importance of relying on official information, not rumors. Then the emails started. Parents in our district got a statement that mostly echoed the summary they'd shown my mom. Key phrase: "At no time were students without access to emergency resources," which was technically true if you consider there was an EpiPen locked in a cabinet to be access. Kids started comparing what they'd told the district investigator. We realized our accounts were being sliced into something that looked like an unfortunate misunderstanding instead of what it was: a power-hungry adult endangering kids to maintain control. Our first meeting with an attorney changed everything. She was a woman in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a legal pad full of bullet points. She listened more than she spoke at first. When we finished unloading, she said, "What you're describing is serious, both civilly and possibly criminally, but the district will do everything possible to minimize this. You need to be organized, and you need evidence." That's when the real work began. We requested my medical records, every lab result, every note. The paramedic report with the line about patient experienced cardiac arrest en route, resuscitated via CPR and epinephrine. We collected witness accounts in detail. Who was where, who saw what, who heard her say what. We made diagrams of the lab, marked positions during key moments. We filed public records requests for the district's training logs. Who had completed emergency medical response training? When? The first surprise came from those logs. According to the district, all staff were supposed to complete an annual refresher on emergency procedures, including handling allergic reactions. According to the logs, Calder M. had not completed it that year, nor the year before. There was a note: "Reminder sent. Exemption requested due to schedule conflict." Our attorney circled that with red ink. "Gold," she said. They let her keep working with kids in high-risk environments without this. We also asked for her personnel file. That took longer and came back heavily redacted, but we saw enough to get the outline. She'd worked at 2 other schools in the district before ours. At both, there were vague notes about parent concerns about classroom climate and disagreements over accommodations. One email, barely visible through the black bars of redaction, chilled me. While Miss C has a strong record of competitive success, I agree that her rigidity around student medical and emotional needs may be better suited to a different environment. Translation: she was a problem, and instead of addressing it, they shuffled her along. Meanwhile, I was in therapy. At first, because my mom insisted. "You almost died," she said. "Then your friend." She couldn't even finish the sentence. "You need support." I didn't want to go. I wanted to file things and read documents and throw myself into the case, not sit on a couch and talk about my feelings. But my panic attacks had gotten worse. The first time I walked into a classroom after the hospital, someone closed the door behind me with a loud click, and my body freaked out. My heart slammed, my palms went sweaty, and I had this irrational certainty that I was going to suffocate. My therapist, Dr. Nguyen, soft-spoken, but not in a patronizing way, helped me name it: trauma. "It's not just what happened to your body," she said. "It's the betrayal. You were harmed by someone you were taught to trust, someone with institutional power. That shakes your sense of safety." She was right. We talked about the focus packs, about how I'd been punished for helping a classmate, about how that conditioning had made me freeze when I should have run. "You learned that silence kept you safe," she said. "Now you're unlearning that. It's going to be messy." Messy was an understatement. While we were slowly putting together our case, the story started to leak. It wasn't intentional at first. Kids talk, parents talk. Someone's cousin knows a guy who writes for the local paper. A journalist contacted my mom. He'd heard about the robotics incident and wanted to hear our side. We agreed, on the condition that he protects students' privacy as much as possible. He was thorough. He built a timeline, corroborated details, requested his own copies of district records. He found emails we didn't know about, like the one from the nurse to the principal the night of the incident. Procedure was not followed. I was not called until after a student broke a window and triggered the alarm. This is unacceptable. It wasn't just about Calder anymore. It was about every adult who hesitated, who prioritized bureaucracy and image over kids. When the article finally ran, it was explosive. Students' cardiac arrest in locked classroom raises questions about district safety culture. The online version went semi-viral, at least locally. People were angry, parents demanded answers, and then Calder responded. She posted a 20-minute video on her personal Facebook page. Someone ripped it and put it on YouTube. In it, she sat in her living room, hair down instead of in her usual tight bun, makeup softer, voice trembling just enough to seem vulnerable. "I've dedicated my life to students," she said. "I push them because I care. That day in the lab, I truly believed Lily was having a panic attack, not a medical emergency. I never locked anyone in. The door locks automatically for safety. I told them they could leave if they needed to." Lie. She called us a small group of disgruntled teens who had banded together to destroy my reputation because I held them to high standards. She said she'd been harassed since the article, that anonymous trolls had threatened her. The comments under the video were a mess. Some people backed her. Kids these days are soft. My son loved her, said she was the only teacher who believed in him. Others were vicious, at us. Maybe Lily shouldn't eat snacks if she's so fragile. Sounds like attention-seeking behavior. Gen Z will weaponize anything to avoid responsibility. I made the mistake of reading those comments at midnight. I had a full-blown panic attack and ended up sleeping on the floor of my mom's room like I was 6 again. Our attorney wasn't surprised. "She's trying to poison the jury pool," she said, "and intimidate you into backing down." It almost worked. Some kids wavered. Their parents got scared. Do we really want our names attached to this? What if colleges Google it? Then the cease and desist letters started arriving. My house, Jonah's house, Mia's house, thick envelopes from a law firm none of us had heard of, full of legalese basically saying, "Stop talking about this publicly, or we will sue you for defamation." My parents brought ours to our attorney. She skimmed it, snorted, and tossed it onto her desk. "Empty threat," she said. "They're hoping you don't know your rights. You do now." We had a choice to make. Go quiet and maybe be a little safer, or keep going and risk everything getting uglier. We kept going. The student group leveled up. We organized evidence into folders with names like medical, admin emails, prior incidents. We used two-factor authentication on everything. We encrypted backups. We attended a school board meeting en masse. I'll never forget walking into that auditorium. The fluorescent lights, the rows of folding chairs, the bored-looking board members with their neat stacks of papers, the American flag in the corner. During public comment, parents got up to speak. One mother, eyes blazing, said, "If you can't keep kids safe from known medical risks, what are we even doing here?" Another parent accused them of trying to bury this until it blows over. The board chair kept repeating, "We can't discuss personnel matters in a public forum," like a broken record. When it was my turn, my legs shook so badly I had to cling to the podium. "I'm Lily," I said into the microphone. Hearing my own voice amplified made me dizzy. "I'm the student who had the allergic reaction in the robotics lab." The room went silent. "I know you can't discuss personnel issues," I said, making air quotes I probably shouldn't have. "But you can discuss policy. You can discuss why the only adult in the room that day was someone who hadn't completed emergency training. You can discuss why kids had to literally break a window to get help." I heard a murmur ripple through the crowd. "You told my parents in email that at no time were students without access to emergency resources." My voice cracked. I was on the floor, dying, while the EpiPen was locked in a cabinet behind the person who refused to unlock it. "That's what you call access?" One board member shifted uncomfortably. Another looked away. Afterward, in the parking lot, we overheard one administrator mutter, "This is going to be a PR nightmare." It already was. What they didn't know was that the journalist wasn't done. He'd kept digging. Through more records requests and some off-the-record conversations with teachers from her previous schools, he found the smoking guns. At her last school, she'd refused to let a diabetic student eat a snack in class to treat a low blood sugar because it disrupted focus. The kids' glucose crashed, and they fainted in the hallway afterward. At the school before that, she'd locked her classroom door and made kids practice resilience by ignoring the fire alarm during a drill because she felt the interruptions were excessive. Each time complaints were filed. Each time administrators had addressed the concern in vague HR language and then quietly recommended her for a different position rather than documenting serious misconduct. "Pass the trash," our attorney called it. Move the problem instead of dealing with it so it becomes someone else's issue. We also found definitive proof that she'd skipped mandatory emergency training multiple years in a row. At one point, an email from a district safety coordinator said, "While I understand Miss C's schedule is demanding, these trainings are critical. Please ensure she attends the next session." She never did. No one enforced it. When the journalist published the follow-up article with all of that laid out, including a timeline showing exactly how many adults had opportunities to intervene and didn't, the tide turned. Mostly, not before one more gut punch. The betrayal came from someone I never thought would hurt me. Her name's Jenna. We'd been friends since freshman year, joined debate together, shared snacks at tournaments, slept on each other's floors. She'd always liked Calder, thrived under her even. Where I saw manipulation, Jenna saw tough love. After the incident, she'd pulled back from me, answered texts slowly, if at all. I told myself she was busy, overwhelmed, processing in her own way. It turned out she was doing something else. One night, someone sent me a link to a Reddit thread where people were discussing the articles, arguing in circles. Someone had posted screenshots of a group chat, our group chat, the one where students had vented about Calder, called her names we probably shouldn't have, speculated angrily about whether the administration would lie. The one where we'd shared memes to cope. Dark jokes like, guess we should all sign a death pact next time instead of a focus pact. Out of context, it made us look vindictive and petty. Like we were out for blood, not justice. The username that had posted them? A throwaway. But the original screenshots still had contact names visible before the usernames were blurred. One of them was clearly Jenna. My stomach dropped. I confronted her the next day in the parking lot. Why? I asked. No preamble. Why would you do that? She refused to meet my eyes. You guys are blowing this way out of proportion, she muttered. She's not a monster. She made a mistake. She locked the door and withheld medical treatment, I said, shaking. I died, Jenna. Mark? I broke off, throat tightening. She pushed us, Jenna snapped. Yeah, maybe too far sometimes. But she got results, and now everyone's dragging her name through the mud, and I thought people should see that you're not exactly innocent either. Innocent of what? Being angry? That's not how it looks online, she said, arms crossed. You sound like a mob. Do you realize you helped her smear us? I asked. My voice went quiet, which scared me more than if I'd screamed. You gave ammo to people who think kids' lives are less important than a teacher's reputation. She flinched, but didn't answer. That was the end of our friendship. It hurt, but ultimately, it didn't stop what came next. If anything, it made us tighten our circle. And then the journalist dropped the full exposé. Not just our small-town paper this time. A regional outlet picked it up. The article was long, detailed, and backed up by a mountain of documents. It had a title like, Pattern of Neglect, How One District Ignored Warnings Until Students Fell Through the Cracks. They had quotes from former colleagues of Calder, from nurses, from parents at her previous schools. Anonymous but damning. Public sentiment flipped almost overnight. Where before it had been kids these days are soft, now it was, how many times does someone have to mess up before we stop letting them near children? The district couldn't contain it anymore. They placed her on administrative leave, pending investigation. We knew from sources inside the building that their investigation had mostly been about figuring out how to minimize liability, but the public pressure changed the calculus. The county prosecutor announced they were reviewing the case. When the charges came, I felt this strange mix of vindication and nausea. Reckless endangerment, our attorney explained. Unlawful restraint. Child endangerment statutes. The DA decided not to pursue anything higher, but it's still serious. They arrested her. She turned herself in, processed, and was released on bail. But seeing her mugshot on the news was surreal. This woman who'd loomed over us in classrooms, who'd made us sign pacts and threatened our futures like she owned them, now reduced to a flat, unflattering photo next to a list of charges. The state education board moved slower, but eventually they pulled her teaching license on an emergency basis. Later, permanently, the district offered settlements to families. We sat at a long conference table in a law office, a stack of papers in front of us. This is a substantial amount, my dad murmured, flipping through. But there's a gag clause, my mom said. Her jaw tightened. Of course there is. Our attorney nodded. They almost always include confidentiality. They don't want you talking about this publicly, ever. Included in the settlement was a clause saying I couldn't disparage the district or its employees. That word, disparage, did a lot of heavy lifting. So we take the money and shut up, I said. Or we keep fighting and risk getting nothing. Pretty much, she said bluntly. There is a third option. She pointed to a paragraph our eyes had skimmed over. Language about non-monetary terms. You can negotiate, she said. You have leverage right now, especially with the public watching. You can ask for more than just a check. We did. We pushed for policy changes. Mandatory, enforced emergency training for any staff working with students, particularly in labs and extracurriculars. Clear protocols for handling documented medical conditions. A student safety committee with actual teeth. And one more thing. An exception to the gag order that allowed me, specifically, to speak publicly about allergy safety and emergency response, as long as I didn't disclose confidential settlement numbers or make factually false statements. They balked. Then, under pressure, they agreed. We weren't the only family negotiating. Other kids' parents added their own conditions. A requirement that the district report substantiated misconduct to the state board instead of quietly transferring staff. An audit of 504 plans and whether they were actually being followed. It wasn't perfect. It didn't bring Mark back. It didn't rewind the minutes in the lab where my life was hanging by a thread. but it was something. As for Calder, she eventually took a plea deal. I didn't attend the hearing. I thought I wanted to. But the idea of seeing her again, of hearing her voice, made my chest tighten in that old familiar way. Our attorney went. She told us later that the judge had been stern, but not theatrical, that Calder had cried, said she never meant to hurt anyone, that she was trying a tough love approach and misjudged the situation. The judge said, intention does not erase impact. She got a suspended sentence with some actual time in county lockup, community service, mandatory counseling, and of course, the permanent loss of her license. Some people thought it was too harsh. Some thought it was too lenient. I thought, at least it's something on the record. A warning for anyone who Googles her name. A crack in the armor of impunity that so often surrounds adults in schools. The last part of this story is still being written, but I can tell you how it's going so far. About a year after everything, a group of us, me, Jonah, Mia, a couple of other students from robotics and debate, sat in my living room with laptops and a whiteboard, and a pile of takeout containers. I don't want this to just be our tragedy, Mia said. I want it to mean something. Like an after-school special? Jonah joked weakly. Like a non-profit, she shot back. The idea started as a joke, honestly. We'll call it Break the Glass, someone said, and we all laughed because it was morbid and on the nose. The name stuck. We incorporated with a slightly more formal title, Break the Glass Foundation, but the heart of it was simple. Student-led advocacy for better emergency protocols in schools. We built a website. We put together a workshop for staff and students called Seconds Matter about recognizing medical emergencies, the importance of epinephrine, why mind over matter is not an allergy treatment. We included information about mental health crises too, because of Mark. The first district to invite us to speak wasn't even our own. Word had spread. A neighboring district's superintendent emailed, saying, "We'd like our staff to hear your perspective." Standing in front of a room full of teachers was one of the weirdest experiences of my life. I told them the story, the way I'm telling you now, minus the personal details I'm legally not allowed to share. I described what it felt like to be on the floor, begging for medication, while an adult lectured me about resilience. I saw some of them wiping their eyes. Others looked furious on my behalf. Afterward, one teacher came up and said, "I didn't realize how much power we have to either help or harm. Thank you for reminding me." We got invited to more places. A statewide conference on school safety, a panel on student voice, eventually a legislative hearing where we testified in favor of a bill requiring schools to stock unassigned epinephrine and train staff to use it. The bill passed. It's not a magic fix. Policies on paper don't always translate to practice, but it's a start. As for me personally, I'd love to say I'm over it, that I faced my trauma, did the activism, and now I sleep soundly every night. Reality is messier. I still freeze a little when someone closes a door and I hear the lock. I still have to talk myself down when my throat feels scratchy and my brain whispers, "What if this is it again?" Sometimes I wake up from dreams where I'm back in that lab, except in the dream, the window won't break no matter how many times I swing the hammer. I go to therapy. I take my meds. I carry my injectors like lifelines. I have a medical ID bracelet now, stainless steel and engraved with allergic to nuts. Epinephrine in bag. I lost a friend to this. I lost another friend in a different way when she chose the side of the person who hurt us. I lost whatever naive faith I had that adults in authority will automatically protect kids. But I gained some things too. I gained a voice I didn't know I had. I gained a community of students who refused to be quiet, who chose each other over our transcripts. I gained the knowledge that focus and discipline are empty words if they come at the cost of basic humanity. If you're waiting for a neat bow at the end of this story, there isn't one. There's just this. I was raised to believe that the way to succeed was to follow the rules, to sign the pacts, to be quiet and obedient and grateful. It took almost dying for me to understand that sometimes the bravest, most necessary thing you can do is break the glass. Even if your hands shake, even if your voice cracks, even if the person you're defying holds your grades, your recommendations, your future in their perfectly manicured hand. Because here's what I learned in that lab, on that floor, gasping for air, while everyone stared at the adult for permission to act. My life is not a teachable moment for someone else's philosophy. My body is not a battlefield for their theories about mind over matter. And silence, no matter how nicely it's branded as focus, can be deadly. So now, when I talk to students, I tell them this. Listen to your body. Know your rights. Read the damn labels. Don't let anyone shame you out of seeking help. And if you ever find yourself in a room where someone in authority tells you to sit down and shut up while someone's life is clearly in danger, be the one who stands. Be the one who breaks the glass.